Welcome. You're listening to Gravity Healthcare Hacks with your host, Melissa Brown, Chief Operating Officer from Gravity Healthcare Consulting and self-professed healthcare nerd. Monthly, we will provide industry expertise and tips to help keep your feet firmly on the ground in the world of healthcare.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast today. This is the third installment of Why Therapy is Changing Now, and you should too. Super excited to have Carly Cronitzer, our lead consultant of therapy services, joining us again today. Hello, Carly.
Hi, Melissa.
Wonderful. So glad to have you. So, we've talked about why is this the time for change? PDPM happened 5 years ago, more than 5 years ago now, and PDPM Medicaid has really just hit the ground over the last year. And that has just really changed the landscape. There really isn't a need to pay the profits to a contract therapy company that you once were, to give them so much of your profit for basically just being a staffing company, since most of them don't provide a ton of mentorship and support to the therapists out in the field. And what we find ourselves recommending at Gravity all the time is going in-house with what we call a hybrid model, where you're an in-house program, but you have this third-party outside support that's really helping to run the operations and compliance for your therapy department. And Carly, you're right at the center of that in so many communities you work with. That's exactly what you're doing. So let our listeners know what is the program like? What is a client going to get if you're there providing these rehab services in a hybrid manner to help them go and stay in-house for the long term?
Yeah, once you get out of what we would consider kind of our startup mode. So when we're first starting with you, the level of meetings and trainings and educations is obviously pretty ramped up during that time, because we're kind of getting on the ground with you. We're in the community. We're working through things and kind of establishing all the processes that fit your community. It's not a one size fits all model. We don't want to apply systems on top of things that aren't broken. It's not you have to adopt every single policy, system, program that we have. Of course, the benefits of going in-house is having discretion and being able to decide what's important at your community. So once we kind of get through startup phase, I think the support that's most appreciated is the probably continued training and education that the entire team gets. I think having your whole team involved in trainings, education, documentation, reviews, therapists want to know what's going on. They want to know where they can improve. And so I think giving them that consistent feedback, and then also just knowing they have another resource to go to. They don't have to just go to their DOR. They can come to us with questions, and whether it's the clinical arm or a compliance question, we can provide that support to them. I always say my favorite part of therapy management contracts is working with the teams. Auditing is auditing. I can sit and read documentation. It's not the most exciting thing in the world. It's a part of the job, but I love working with the teams and kind of brainstorming and working through those things with them. And I think that's really where they see value in it too. When they have a problem, they have other resources to go to, not just that DOR for help on things.
Yeah, I love what you said there. I totally agree with you. I think that personal relationship, that face-to-face, that in-person time that we spend in the startup phase is so important. It's essential for the therapist to understand that we are therapists and clinicians first. Yes, we're monitoring the operations. Yes, we're making sure things are compliant. Yes, we're paying attention to what the regulations are, but we are therapists first and foremost, and we know and we agree the patient has to come first. But we can't ignore the business side either. It's really finding that right balance that is not mutually exclusive. You can do both. You can be operationally successful and give great patient care. It's a lot harder to do that under contract rehab because they've got to take their piece of the pie too. So you kind of cut them out, it makes things a lot simpler. And, we have just seen the value over the years of, usually when we do a single site startup, you and or I are on site for an entire week. We're face to face with those therapists. We're in the trenches with them. We're supporting them, training them, answering their needs, learning what's going on in that building and adjusting everything to how that building is going to flow, what's going to work, how do we customize this to make this the best possible program. And then we're back again several weeks or a month later. And then we're back again several weeks or a month later. And once we usually get through the first quarter, what becomes essential is just once every quarter we're there on site. And, sometimes clients say, is it really necessary? Why do you have to be here? can't you just do this remotely? And there's so much we can do remotely. It's just a different age we live in, and I'm grateful for that, as I know you are. And I think our therapists are grateful for that too. But there is just something that happens when you're face to face. You're reminded, like your gut is just reminded, this person that I'm getting instruction from on a regular basis is a good person. They want to do well, they want to do right. They're here to support me, they're my advocate. And lots of people, therapists will have questions that they will never ask until you just happen to be sitting there at the desk next to them on your quarterly visit. And they're like, I've been thinking about this for the last 2 months. I never picked up the phone and called you. But since you're here, I'm going to go ahead and ask you this really important question. And so I think that face-to-face time cannot be underrated. And unfortunately, we've just been called into so many buildings where contract rehab, maybe the person shows up once a year. They maybe show up for their weekly Zooms with the DOR, but not even that is guaranteed. Like, it's just amazing to me how little support they really provide to these teams out in the field. What have you seen with the face to face, Carly?
One of my absolute favorite things is when I'm on site with teams, kind of watching their walls come down a little bit when we're new. When you come in as a consultant and they think you are just here to upset their world, tell them everything they're doing wrong, kind of paint them as everything they're doing is an issue, or not make them look good to the administration. That's really what they can feel like we're there to do. And when they come in and realize, like, we want you to be the best therapist you can be. We want you practicing at the top of your license. We want your community to be successful. We want your outcomes to be above national averages, and that we are here to support that in a way that's showcasing you and how wonderful you are, and finding those areas we can work on and seeing growth. And I can see from day to day when the walls come down a little bit and when you start to see that trust building with a team. And I love to sit with my long standing teams after a year, and we'll joke about, like, what'd you think of me when I first got here or got to your community? And they're like, we were so nervous. We were so worked up. We didn't think it was going to work. We didn't want this, to now it being this long standing relationship where there's trust, there's growth, and everyone is happy. We want it to be good for everyone. And we really try to reinforce that when we come on site with your communities. We're not here to catch you. We're not looking for a gotcha moment. We want to help you in the community.
Yeah, it's all about making relationships too, because in contract rehab, if a therapist is working underneath you, you're their boss. You can enforce, right? But in this model, there's a lot more of gaining agreement that has to happen. We really need to get the therapist to buy in. And I think that's one of the secret sauces we really have at Gravity, is that because we're clinicians first and we understand how to balance that with the business that just needs done every day. I have not looked at different regulations that come down, or different payment structures or things, and said, oh my goodness, I can't do what I need to anymore. I always take a step back and say, okay, how do I get done what I need to get done with a patient while still functioning optimally within these payment constraints that I am under? There has always been a way. I've never found myself in a situation where I couldn't do what was really clinically necessary just because of some sort of operational constraint or some compliance regulation. There was always a way to work around it. And that's one of the things I loved about ownership at Gravity, and one of the reasons I've been here for so long is because they've always been the same way. It was never, we can't do that, or this is the end. It was like, okay, this is the reality. How do we work around this compliantly, ethically, legally, to achieve all the goals we want to with patients while still being, business minded? And I think one of the things that's really different about our approach from other groups is that we do not we do not manage by numbers with the therapists. We don't go to them and say, your Part B units are too low, you need to get them down. I go to them and I say, hey, Carly, I was looking over Mr. Jones's case, and I noticed that you're working on wheelchair positioning. You're seeing him for 2 units a day, and all you're doing is wheelchair positioning. Have you thought about doing some manual therapy, doing some trigger point releases? Have you thought about functional PENS e-stim that's going to help actually retrain his muscles and bring that alignment between the front and the back of his trunk so that he can sit up in the chair? Have you thought about different exercises or stretches that you can do for this patient that are going to facilitate the wheelchair positioning rather than treating the symptom? Let's treat the cause. And a lot of therapists have just never been trained with that perspective, and really taking a holistic approach to addressing the root cause of why patients are having symptoms that we're now trying to treat. So really going face to face, that clinical mentorship perspective, and managing by the clinic rather than managing by numbers with the therapist is very, very important. What do you like to do in that realm, Carly?
I agree. I love the clinical component and the benefits of this is where you kind of get that hybrid where you still have the benefit of experts in the field. We have on our team speech therapists, physical therapists, occupational therapists. If there's we can't know everything or know the best approach for every single thing, and we would never claim to, but we have also support and other people we can go to within our team. So they really get the best of both worlds in the sense of getting that expertise and clinical guidance while not having to have the overhead of contract therapy in that model.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the other things in our approach too that's been really successful on the long-term care side. So one of the gut checks that I always give to facility ownership or leadership, if they say, I'm thinking maybe therapy's not working super well for me anymore. One of the best gut checks is your long-term care utilization. This means you take the number of long-term care patients that were on therapy caseload last month and you divide it by your total census of long-term care patients. So if you had 30 patients on caseload and you had 100 long-term care patients, you have a 30% utilization. Pretty simple statistic to pull forward. Most communities will say, I think we're fine. And then they'll go look into it and find out they're about 15 to 20%. Almost every single rehab audit I've ever done, everyone was at 15, 20% or less. I've even seen 5% utilization in long-term care, which is just devastating to me to think about that. The real number should be between 30 to 40%. It should fluctuate from month to month. We don't have like an exact target for it, but 30 to 40%. Similarly, we see on the assisted living side, it should be around 20 to 25%. Independent living should be around 10, maybe even 15%, depending on how old the population is. If it's an older community with a more mature age, independent living, you might be closer to 15%. And so those are three really good gut checks, depending on which level of living you're at, that you can go back and say, okay, I want to know how many patients you treated in this level of care last month, and then what your census was for last month, and you can run that number very quickly. So if you're off by even 5 or 10%, that is significant, not just financially, but also in all the clinical needs that are unmet. And to everything that you've said already, Carly, it's very true. The therapists want to do well. They believe I've tried the 3 things that are in my toolbox and they didn't work for this patient. So I don't know what I can do about the fact that they're falling. I don't know what I could do about the fact that their wheelchair positioning is not great. I don't know how to get this patient more independent with ADLs. I've picked them up 2 or 3 times and we haven't been able to make lasting progress. And those are cases that I love too, where I get the screens back from a clinic. I start diving into them, look at the medical record, and then I get on a Zoom with that therapist and I say, hey, therapist, I'm looking over Mrs. Jones's case and I see that she's fallen 4 times in the last month and you've screened her twice. Why didn't we screen her 4 times? First off, that should have happened. So we make sure those systems and processes are in place. We should be screening after every single fall. But if a patient's fallen, there's almost never a reason why at least one of the disciplines shouldn't get involved. And so asking them, okay, so what have you done for Mrs. Jones? And they give you the 3 strategy they've tried. And we're able as a team to go to them and say, well, here's another. Have you ever thought about doing this? What about trying this? What about trying that? So giving them more tools to tuck away into their toolbox. And as we start breaking through case after case with the therapist, they start to have so many more tools in their toolbox that they begin to independently apply those. And, our tools are proven out in the clinic. We've been therapists for eons, so we did these things. They were very successful. When we pass this along to therapists coming up behind us, they try them, they work, and then they start to apply it to other patients because it's successful. It does work. So what do you try to do from the mentorship perspective, Carly?
One of the things I get the best feedback on is our onboarding process. So we let our therapists get in the building, get oriented, kind of just get used to their day-to-day flow because we don't want to throw too much at them at one time. But then, within their first 30 days, we bring them back for onboarding, which we consider more of the clinical mentorship, and then letting them know what resources are there. I'm not going to review everything with them on this. They're not going to retain all of it anyway, but I want them to know where to go when they have that question. I want them to say, that's right. The Gravity consultant told me they have a reference guide for that, or they have a resource for that. And so kind of setting them up to have all the tools that they need. And then you can also tell with a team when something clicks. It may take a couple times. We all take a couple times hearing it, but all of a sudden something clicks with them with GG, and it could have been another training that we did. It could have been referring them back to a reference guide that we have, but all of a sudden you see that click, and then it's just done well moving forward. And I also see therapists feel more confident taking on new hires or new grads, and all of a sudden they feel more confident in also helping their peers with questions that they're having because they now understand it as well. So you really just see it trickle down through the building and you see success.
Absolutely. And I think one of the other things that's really exciting, so, we have this great clinical mentorship. We provide really great operational outcomes. One of the things I really love to share with leadership and ownership of nursing homes or continuing care retirement communities is that we are really positioning you to shine. That's the goal, right? So, unlike contract rehab, where as they build your program, as they build the therapy census, they're taking a percentage, so their revenue is growing too. We really prefer a flat rate model. It's a fixed flat rate. You know exactly what to expect every month. You know exactly what your costs are. As we build the program, all those margins stay with you. And instead of paying that premium for contract rehab, you have this great stability of your therapy team. You have control over who's on the therapy team. So if someone's not the right cultural fit, you can quickly make that change and it's not a big deal. You have control over the quality of services, the concierge approach, productivity, all those types of things. And it helps your bottom line. So it's a win-win for everybody. It's a win for the therapy, it's a win for patient, it's a win for the organization as a whole. And Carly, I'd like to talk now about what does the process really look like? So if somebody says, you know what, I'm ready to sort of kick contract therapy to the curb, I want to go in-house, but I know I need hybrid support. What does that process of transition look like for a community?
I think if you're considering that, one of the best things you can do is get that one-time audit, get the data, get the numbers, run the numbers and see what it's going to look like for you. You have to be prepared to obviously onboard all of that staff. They're going to become your staff. So running them through your HR, your payroll, your benefits, things like that, signing the staff on. Most staff will stay with the community. We found that pretty exclusively that they stay and don't move with the therapy company. And then once you get them on, having that outside support set up and kind of entering that startup mode that we talked about, what's great is we're going to do all the back work for you. We're going to make sure your EMR is ready to go. We're going to do all of the go live information, get all of that information into your EMR. We're going to help with integration processes. So you're integrated for PBJ, you're going to get billing and payroll exports, you're going to get everything you need. All of that is done before we even get on site and work with your team. So that initial startup when we're there with you is really just getting everyone through the processes, making sure everything is, it should be seamless. There shouldn't be, the resident shouldn't feel it. Really, the administration shouldn't feel it. We're going to come in and kind of smooth out everything and make sure the team is set up to be successful and then provide that ongoing support.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think there's going to be this huge cost associated with a transition like this, and there really isn't. You do have to pay a cost to integrate the EMR and things like that, but those are very typical costs, nothing extreme there. The cost for the EMR is a reasonable cost as well. I think right now it's right around $600 a month per site, so that's a reasonable cost. And then really your employee cost is always significantly less than what contract rehab you were paying them because they were making a profit off of it, plus they had overhead, and usually pretty significant overhead in these contract therapy companies. They have tons and tons of depth on the management side, some of which I think is redundant and not always necessary. So, they have a lot of costs they have to make up for, plus they need to make profits, etc. So you're kind of cutting out that middleman, cutting out that excess cost. And, I've had clients come to me, we advise people how to open their own home health agency, how to expand into new lines of business, get into adult daycare, all sorts of things. And, I've had clients come to me that run a CCRC and say, what's the thing I could do today that would make the biggest difference? And I always say it's therapy. It's literally like flipping a switch because it's so seamless, because we have the right process together. There's usually just a couple days of disruption in rehab with just the therapist getting used to everything, getting to know us. It's the nerves that anybody would have whenever a system is changing. But the patients don't see any difference other than their services getting better over, the course of the first month as we're involved. And we right size the volume of services and the long-term care approach and the clinical expertise, all those kinds of things we're training and supporting the therapists on. And really, it's in a kind of an immediate overnight success. Every single time we've done this, the very first month, the client makes more money. Every single time. Their margins are better, revenue goes up. It's all a positive for the client. So it is one of those things where if you're partnered with the right group like somebody like Gravity, where it can literally be flip a switch, you give that 60-day termination notice, and 60 days later, you're already on the upside from day one. There really isn't this growth period you have to get to. And there really aren't all these other hidden costs associated with this transition. Yes, you usually have to buy the therapist from the contract therapy company, and that usually runs you $5,000 to $7,000 a therapist, but it's a one-time fee and then it's done. Much less expensive than actually recruiting all those therapists and training them and dealing with all the operational burden that would cause. And then you have to get everybody IT devices. They all need laptops. That's pretty obvious, right? But that's really it. There's nothing else. We've done this a bunch of times. That's really all that's involved. And when you work with a company like us, instead of having to take all the responsibility for that on, you really have very little responsibility that your team needs to do. You need to sign an EMR contract. You need HR to onboard them. You need IT to get them a device, and we do everything else. And that's why this model's been so successful and why we've seen client after client after client recognizing the immediate and ongoing benefit of this type of model to their bottom line and to the clinical outcomes.
I agree. I think that visibility into your therapy program is really important. And when you're working with contract company, if you don't know the questions to ask, or they provide you the same old quarterly report every single quarter, or if that, if you even see them then, um, if you don't know what type of questions to ask to prompt for different things, if maybe you want to know how your outcomes are, but they're ultimately still controlling that data, controlling the information for you. And they're likely going to not give you things that don't make them look great or spin it in a different way. And when you go in house, you have visibility. There's no gatekeeping with us. There's no incentive for us to say, oh no, that really looks okay, or have an excuse for something, because we're there to build it's your program, it's your therapist, your team, and we're there to help you grow that and build that and shine. So with contract therapy, and again, there are some out there doing it better than others, of course, but you don't always have that visibility into your department in house.
Yeah, that's a great point. The transparency and the ability to get hold of any of those data points. It's interesting. One client I'm working with right now, she reached out to her contract rate company and said, "Hey, you guys said you were going to be here 2, 3 times a year. We've never seen you. We want to have quarterly meetings." And they said, "Sure, we can have a quarterly meeting." She said, "I expect you to bring a report and give us a bunch of data and tell us what's going on." And they said, "Okay, tell us what you want, and then we'll pull that information." And she's like, "No, you're the contract rehab company. You're the vendor. I want you to tell me what's important. How do I know? I'm a nursing administrator. Like, I understand some of the basics, but they're not therapy experts, nor do they need to be." So, it's just surprising how much the contract therapy model has seemed to just disintegrate over the last 5 years. And it used to be great. I used to work for contract rehab and I was very happy to do it. But we are really focused on this model because we think the era of contract rehab is going behind us. And this is the new future and the best way to move forward to give everybody involved the best possible outcomes.
I agree 100%. And like we've kind of covered on this series here, we've talked about financial outcomes, morale, retention, you outcomes. You really see it across the board. You're probably in this administrators are out there trying to run 5-star buildings, and they don't have control over the staff that's responsible for a lot of those metrics. So when again you take control over that and have your in-house team and have the support you need, we can see your building be really successful.
Yeah, I mean, I just saw today in the media that Medicare is shifting their focus for special focus facilities from staffing to falls. Well, falls is 90% therapy. If your therapy is not doing what they can and should be doing, you are going to be flagging for falls. It's just one more obvious step towards how important it is to have high quality therapy and not therapy that essentially meets your staffing needs and doesn't really do anything else. Well, I
Yep.
think go ahead, Carly.
Sorry. We've heard specifically from administrators, I want my DOR at our QAPI meetings, at our QM meetings, at our fall stand-ups. And the feedback they get is that they can't be at all of those things because they have too many other metrics to worry about hitting, and their time is divided. It's not solely working for you. And so again, bringing that staff in-house, having control over their time, and really determining what's valuable to your community, we see that benefit really play out with outcomes as well.
So, Carly, why is this something you're really passionate about?
I love seeing growth in the communities. I love seeing the therapists feel more comfortable, feeling supported, stepping outside of, their internal insecurities with, and their own skill sets. I love seeing the administrators be happy with the therapy outcomes and the growth that their community's been able to have. I love that it's not a one size fits all and we're able to customize the approach for each community and give them what they need. It's not this blanket approach of this is how every building runs within our company. We're able to give you what you need, have it be a customized approach, and really see value for the residents, the therapists, and the building as a whole.
I think that's a great way to summarize it. I feel like it's just shaking off the shackles, or maybe barriers is a better word to put it, that just tends to happen with contract rehab. No one means for it to happen, but it's just the reality. The silos, the things that therapists can't do because they're told they can't because it's not their building, and things that administration can't make therapists do because it's not their employees, and all of those things that happens, and even that sort of she said environment where fingers get pointed, it really eliminates all of that, puts us all on the same team. We all say that, we all want it to be true, we all try to make it true, but it isn't when we're all reporting to different people. And so when it makes us all reporting to the same entity, the same end zone, we all are on the same team on the football field, carrying that football all the way to the end zone. That's where we really see that mutual success. And I think it's just something we're really excited about. And again, I would remind you, if you've got your gut going off telling you, I think I could be doing better in rehab, I think I'm missing the mark, even if you think you're doing well, it doesn't mean you can't be doing better. Again, 100% of clients we've worked with that went from contract rehab to in-house, or went from in-house to in-house with this hybrid model, 100% of them have doubled their therapy margins or more within the first year. That just speaks for itself. So really thankful to you, Carly, for being here today. Wonderful to have you on our team as part of this exciting model that we're offering to clients. And just want to remind you that if you enjoyed today's podcast, please don't forget to subscribe. And remember, it's not just what you know, but how you apply it that makes all the difference. See you next time.